employer force you to take a COVID-19 vaccine? Two federal regulations were argued today before the U.S. Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. At issue, the Biden administration wants vaccine mandates for all healthcare workers at providers who receive federal funds. The other regulation applies to companies with 100 or more workers, and it requires either a vaccination or a weekly COVID test. The ruling on federal vaccine requirements would affect more than 80 million people. Take a listen to some of the arguments from the attorneys today representing the National Federation of Independent Businesses and the U.S. government.
Our nation's businesses have distributed and administered hundreds of millions of COVID vaccines to Americans. Businesses have encouraged and incentivized their employees to get vaccines, but a single federal agency tasked with occupational standards cannot commandeer businesses economy-wide into becoming de facto public health agencies. So this court should immediately stay OSHA's unprecedented ETS before Monday, when OSHA begins enforcement.
The applicants try to portray this standard as unprecedented, but this lies in the heartland of OSHA's regulatory authority. Congress charged the agency with setting nationwide standards to protect the health and safety of employees throughout the nation, and Congress specifically appropriated money to OSHA to address COVID-19 in the workplace. Nothing in the statute or the agency's regulatory history bars the use of these measures. Just the opposite. Section 669A5 of the OSHA Act specifically contemplates that immunization requirements can be imposed under the Act, and OSHA has previously protected workers with measures like masking, testing, and encouraging vaccination.
Joining us now, constitutional lawyer Andrew Lieb out of Long Island, New York. Thank you so much for joining us, and I so appreciate your expertise. First of all, let me ask you this. What is the most spectacular piece of this case from your perspective?
Well, let's talk function before we get into case. I loved that when the Ohio, the attorney representing Ohio, challenging the vaccine mandate, he was asked and he said, Ohio could make a vaccine mandate. So we need to make it very clear, Ashley, from the start. This case was not about whether government in the global sense, state, federal, can do a vaccine mandate. What this case was about was whether an agency within the executive branch was granted power by Congress, and whether they could make that ruling, whether it be the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid or OSHA.
And if they can make that ruling, it really opens the floodgates, doesn't it, Andrew, to really allow a lot of potential regulation?
It's actually interesting, Ashley, you said that, because Justice Roberts agrees with you completely. To the Chief Justice over and over and over again today said, is this really a directive from the White House? Is the White House not able to get Congress to do this, and has charged each agency within the White House to look for statutory text? You see what happens is people are confused. They don't think the executive branch can make laws. They can. They just need authority from Congress to make laws. And Roberts wanted to know if the White House charged them for looking for that authority. But I will say, when asked point blank by Justice Breyer, the Solicitor General said, no, we were not so directed.
Do you think that'll be dispositive of it, or do you think that that's going to be an aside and there still could be a ruling that says, yes, it's okay for this to happen and these people have to have a vaccine and or a COVID test?
Well, let's start off with what the mandate is, and then I'll tell you what I think. The mandate says by the 10th, this Monday, and that's why this is such an urgency, by this Monday, anyone who's not vaccinated in 100 or more employer shops has to be wearing a mask. But they're not doing the testing requirement till February 9th. So January 10th is the first, and then February 9th. If you're vaccinated or your employer goes that route, you're exempted from that in the workplace. Now to what I think this case turns on, and it's a legal mumbo jumbo, but people need to be familiar. There's this thing where we look to agencies and we say, and Justice Sotomayor was very big on this, the agency has the expertise. Does the justices? They're not epidemiologists. Does the Congress? They don't have the resources of the agency. But on the other side of the coin is this thing called the major questions doctrine. And the case is going to turn, Ashley, on whether the major questions doctrine is invoked anytime there's a separations of power issue when we're dealing with such a major regulation under what's called the Commerce Clause of our Constitution. And that's an open question. Although we did get signals, I need to point out that it's a question of, does major questions doctrine go to Congress on just ambiguities or any separations of power issue between the branches of government?
And I know some of the ones arguing it against it have said, listen, we're going to face a real labor shortage, right? And it's going to be very expensive if, in fact, these rules can stand and that Biden's administration can do these things. All right, let's pivot a little bit only because we have a short amount of time. Logistics. Number one, are you surprised that the briefs didn't suffice and there was actually a hearing today? And number two, when might we expect an outcome?
Great questions. So I need to start off with the briefs, and you're right. It's unusual that we're hearing oral arguments on an emergency application. It's also unusual it's the full court as opposed to one justice. But I think that Roberts has been signaling that we need legitimacy of the court, and that's key. And to answer your second question, Alito said, can we have an administrative adjournment? Can we have an administrative stay? And the Solicitor General said yes, so that's what I see happening.
All right, I'm sorry to jump in, but we're out of time. Andrew Lieb, great to have you as always. Thank you so much for your expertise. My time is up. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. But up